Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be finally finishing our series on bard spells. Today we're going to be going over my favorite picks generally for magical secrets. So we're going to go over our 10th level options, our 14th, our 18th, and then we'll go over the 6th level options available to lore bards at the end of the video. So I do want to apologize firstly. I've been even more erratic in my schedule than usual lately, so that's not been great, and you know, I'm going to try to get back on target. Also, I have had a couple people now ask me about the possibility of covering some Pathfinder 2e stuff, and I think that's something I might be interested in. I haven't actually played Pathfinder 2e ever, so that's going to be a new experience for me. But I think after the whole OGL stuff and just some of Wizards' other comments lately, you know, their tour of shame they seem to be doing right now, I think that there's a lot of interest in games other than, you know, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and on, you know, third-party creators and stuff like that. And to be honest, I'm kind of interested in that stuff myself. So it doesn't mean I'll give up on 5e entirely. It doesn't mean that I won't cover like 1 D&D when it comes out. But I don't think that, you know, adding some Pathfinder to the mix is necessarily the worst thing I could do either. So anyways, let me know what you think in the comment section. I've had a couple of people suggest it, and I think that it's, you know, probably something that I might want to look into, even though I have no experience with it whatsoever. Classic Rob right there. Anyways, let's just jump in here. So with our 10th level magical secrets, we have access to 5th or lower level spells from any class spell list in the game. I do want to point out though that there's a couple areas where bards tend to be very kind of like lacking, and one of those would be like battlefield control, and another one would be like summoning conjuration type spells. They're also kind of lacking in damage spells, but I find that that's usually not as much of a priority for me. Although, you know, that's nothing wrong if that's, you know, maybe your party has no AoE damage dealers, in which case Synaptic Static or something like that is a great choice, you know. Taking Fireball on your lore bard, you know, there's nothing wrong with that kind of stuff. If you sort of see that, like, oh, hey, we kind of have a hole in the party's composition here, and maybe I could try to fill that with my magical secrets. I think that's perfectly fine. I'm just saying that in general, these are areas that bards kind of lack in, and, you know, I might tend to take spells of that nature. So anyways, my first suggestion, which I pretty much would always take as a 10th level bard, is Find Greater Steed. Yes, that's only a 4th level spell. We could have had a 5th level spell, but Find Greater Steed is amazing. You know, anything we cast on ourselves while we're like riding the steed gets like twinned to it, you know. We cast a healing spell on ourselves, we heal our steed at the same time, you know. It's awesome. Maybe we're like a swords bard and we cast Shadow of Moyle on ourselves and then it gets twinned onto our steed. I mean, oh, it's so good, you know. Anyways, Find Greater Steed, we all know it's awesome. I don't need to go into tons of detail. Some of the summoning and conjuration spells. In general, I would probably stick to the Tasha's summoning spells. They tend to be way more table friendly, and you're not, you know, having to worry about the dungeon master choosing the creatures for you, or you having to flip through a ton of books. That's the one reason why I'm not as big a fan of conjure animals these days as I used to be. And it's not because the spell itself has gotten worse. It hasn't. It's an amazing spell. It's just that a lot of times I'd rather just take the easy way that's going to be nice and quick. Here's the stat block. I get to make a couple basic choices, you know, not too complicated, and we're good to go. We're not flipping through 12 different forms of monster manuals trying to find the perfect creature, you know, or hoping the DM doesn't screw us and give us a bunch of CR14 creatures or something. However, so Summon Celestial and Summon Aberration are two that I wrote down, but honestly, even taking lower level summons and scaling them up with higher level spell slots is actually a very good option a lot of times. They tend to get like more attacks and everything else, right? I might still consider Summon or Conjure Elemental, sorry, but honestly, I think it's quite a bit weaker than the newer choices we have, and it's one that I probably wouldn't take. Uh, as far as battlefield control, one spell I would almost always take on a bard, even ahead of the summoning spells, to be honest, especially if nobody else in the party has it, is Wall of Force. Wall of Force is a complete game changer. It's pretty hard to ignore it. It is an amazing spell. I also wanted to mention Destructive Wave. Again, this wouldn't be like a top tier choice for me, but it is a pretty nice spell. You know, combines like damage and some AoE and has some other stuff as well with it. And so I don't think it's bad either. But overall, like, it's pretty hard to go wrong with Find Greater Steed, Wall of Force, maybe a summoning spell. And like I said, if I'm playing like a Swords Bard, maybe Shadows of Moil, it's a pretty nice self buff, right? Anyways, moving on to our 14th level Magical Secrets, we now have access to 7th level spells or less. I'll save a couple of the really good ones till the end, but let's start out with one of the most obvious ones, Heal. Again, it's only a 6th level spell, but it's a very strong choice. If we don't have somebody with like a cleric or somebody else who can cast Heal, then it's pretty nice to have. Also, if I'm riding my Find Greater Steed, then I might want to heal myself and heal him at the same time. You know, also good. I wrote down Hero's Feast. I really like this spell a lot, but I've mentioned in other videos, I really like this as like a wish spell. You know, like I finished the day, I didn't end up using my 9th level spell slot, or we haven't started the adventure yet, and the DM's like, is there anything you want to do before you set out? And you're like, yeah, last night, before I rested, I used my wish spell to cast Hero's Feast on the party, and then we took a long rest, so I got my spell back. Let's go. You know, that's my personal favorite way to use it, but it's still a very, very strong spell. It's one of the best buffs around, and the fact that it lasts 24 hours is just glorious. Would I take it necessarily here? Probably not, but you know, I got to at least mention it as a 6th level spell since it's, you know, in the options here, right? Word of Recall. This one I wasn't actually going to take, but I've had a couple of people suggest it, and I actually saw somebody use it in the game, and I was like, okay, actually, maybe I was wrong. That is a pretty handy spell to have. You know, sometimes you just need to get out of a bad situation, and Word of Recall does that quite nicely. Plane Shift. This isn't just... Plane Shift is a very versatile spell, right? You can not only just like go to a different plane of existence, but you could also use it offensively to try to banish somebody. Granted, it does allow a saving throw if the target is unwilling, and if they have legendary saving throws, which by 14th level a lot of things will, then I probably would not use it in that situation. But there are a lot of adventures, especially by 14th level, where you have to go to other planes, and sometimes your DM will provide a way, but sometimes they won't. So, you know, I think that the versatility of the spell, the fact that I can use it to move us to other locations, the fact that we could use it, you know, in a fight to get a powerful enemy out of here, basically an ultimate banishment spell, I do like it quite a bit. Magic Jar. Again, this is a very interesting spell. It has a lot of potential. It can be pretty fun as well. It does have the limitation of only being able to be used on humanoids, which can be rather annoying. And while I think this is a really fun choice and a really cool choice, again, it's like a A tier or maybe like low A or high B tier choice. But there's a couple S tier choices here, so you know. But I did want to mention it. I like it quite a bit. Let's get to the good stuff though. Obviously, we've got things like contingency, which I've done a video on before, and I had a whole section on that for like bard choices and stuff. I really love contingency. It's just such a handy, useful spell. Really, the only limits are your creativity and the fact that it, you know, has to be a 5th level, lower level spell. But contingency is awesome. However, there's one choice that I think is even better, and that, of course, is Simulacrum. This spell is so awesome. Now, granted, the caching time is horrendous. The gold cost is very high. This is another one where if I can cache it with a wish, that is my preferred method of doing so. However, the spell is just so powerful. Even, like, my personal preference is to make a Simulacrum of somebody who's actually not me. Especially if we have, like, a high damage dealing, like, ranged person in the party. then that'll be my go-to choice. Like, let's say we have a fighter, I don't know, like an arcane archer, and he's just using a bow, and he sits back, and he just action surges and does a truckload of damage using, you know, magic bows, magic arrows, and sharpshooter. He's not getting hit very much. He doesn't have to worry about not being able to regain spells because he doesn't have spells to begin with. And just, you know, he's always doing damage, which is fun. That being said, if I do want to copy Spellcaster, it's still pretty good. They get duplicates of all my spells. They can't regain those spells. So, you know, once they've used that spell slot, it's just gone forever. But it's still really powerful. I like the spell a lot. Our friend Megan had a lot of fun with this spell. We won't get too crazy with that story, but, you know. For those of you who remember that campaign, you know what we're talking about. Other suggestions, I do have a couple. I think that Simulacrum and Contingency are pretty hard to beat. Heal still being up there on that list as well. But Wall of Thorns is one that I think is pretty strong. It's a druid spell. Does pretty good damage. It's kind of a lot like Wall of Fire, except that it's actually a wall. So that's better than Wall of Fire, of course. It really restricts people's movement if they try to come through the wall. I think it's like 4 times movement or something it takes. The wall is like 5 feet thick to use, right? So, you know, just a bunch of damage. If you cast it, they get caught in the wall. It does damage just like Wall of Fire does. It obstructs movement, or vision, I should say, just like, you know, most wall spells do. It's a very, very strong choice. I just don't know that it's stronger than a couple of these others. And then there is one that I hadn't thought of, but somebody suggested to me Bones of the Earth, which is another druid spell, because you can like raise pillars, and if somebody fails a dexterity saving throw, you can actually like pin them against the roof if the roof is like 30 feet or less, because the pillar goes to 30 feet high. And that's just kind of funny. And you get like 6 pillars. You can even arrange them, like if you want to make a wall of pillars and be like a wall of stone, you can even do that, right? So it's a pretty flexible spell. It's also a hilarious spell if you manage to pin somebody against the roof. Again, the strongest choice, probably not. It's one I never would have thought of on my own, probably, but, you know, if somebody told me about it, I was like, man, okay, that's actually pretty funny. So we put it on the list anyways. Finally, 18th level. There's really only one choice here, so we might as well just talk about it right off the bat, and that is Wish. I've already mentioned Wish a couple times. Wish is the most powerful spell in the game. I know people will be like, oh, but you could take this or that or whatever else. I mean, Wish is any 8th level spell or lower, you know, if you need it, right? It is Simulacrum. It is Contingency. It's whatever else you wanted it to be, you know? It's just awesome. However, you do get 2 choices here. So, in addition to Wish, what else are we going to pick? We have some really strong possibilities. Oh, I should also mention, at this point, one thing I will mention towards the end. I'm going to go list a bunch of 9th level spells, but I'm going to mention a couple 8th level spells as well. And the reason is because when we went over the Bard spell list in the last video, Bards don't have a lot of really great 8th level choices. And I do think that, you know, if I want to save my 9th level spell slot for Wish, which I'm probably going to do, having something to cast with my 8th level spell slot isn't necessarily a bad option. So that does open up the idea that maybe I'll just grab an 8th level spell with my other magical secret. So anyways, when we get to 8th level spells, now you'll know why, right? Anyways, in addition to Wish, we could take Shape Change. This spell's amazing. We all know that. It is awesome. You know, it's also a really fun spell. So, you know, not a lot to say about that. You know, turning the dragons and stuff is amazing. Mass Heal. Now, it's true that we get Power Word Heal, but Mass Heal is just way better. Way better. So, if we wanted to play that healer type of role, or even if we just wanted to like be able to fill in with some big heals on occasion, but we're trying to do a bunch of other stuff because, you know, we are a bard, right? Then Mass Heal becomes a very strong possibility. Prismatic Wall. In the White Spire campaign that I ran, which went all the way to level 20, one of the players in that campaign was a bard. And in addition to Wish, he took Prismatic Wall. And man, we had some fun with that spell. Pushing people through the wall. Reverse gravitying people through the wall. Like, It is awesome. I love Prismatic Wall. Not as much as Wish, but it's pretty close. Well, it's not close in terms of power. It's close in terms of fun. Anyways, so Prismatic Wall. I also put down Illusory Dragon. Personally, I think this is kind of a mid-tier choice, but it is interesting in this because of one main reason. It is a 9th level spell with no verbal component, and that's usually pretty rare. I think it's a lot more questionable than some of these other spells, though. It's one that, when it works, is great, but there are a lot of limits and conditions on it. So I would, like I said, it's a mid-tier choice. Worth mentioning, but probably not worth taking, is Holy Aura. This is one of the best party buff spells in the entire game. I just feel like this, we have so many other options. I just feel like some of these are stronger. Lastly on the list, I put Maze, and this was because, as I already mentioned, Bunch don't have a lot of good options for 8th level spells. Maze is one of the best crowd control spells in the game. It's a pretty good use for 8th level spell slot. Now, you might think, well, I already have Force Cage as a bard, as a 7th level spell slot. I could just upcast that and use my 8th level spell slot. And that is true. You could do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is a great idea. However, Maze requires an intelligence check to escape, whereas Force Cage could be escaped if they have some method of teleportation. It does require a saving throw, but if they have legendary saving throws plus teleportation, they can get out. This is an ability check, not a saving throw. So legendary saves do nothing. Now, maybe they have high intelligence, but a lot of really powerful monsters have surprisingly mid-range intelligence. And you probably have a pretty good spell save DC by now, So Maze becomes a pretty interesting option. Now, granted, you can't put them in the cage and then kill them with range attacks or something like that, because they're actually just banished. So, they're gone. You can't fight them anymore. But it is pretty handy. And, like I said, having something to do with my 8th level spell slot, that's not a bad thing. So anyways, that covers all of our magical secrets, unless, of course, you are a lore bard. And there's actually so many good choices for 3rd level. I'm sure I'm going to miss a lot. I'm sure I'll have people in the comment section saying, oh, what about this? What about that? What about, Trust me, there's a lot of good choices. In general, though, I am not going to bother with 1st level spells. I see people suggest things like Eldritch Blast and Shield and stuff, right? I mean, I could take a 1-level dip in a class, like, say, Warlock. Like, if I wanted to go Hexblade, I could get Eldritch Blast and I could get Shield. I could take 1-level Sorcerer, I can get Shield. I don't know that I want to use one of my magical secrets, because to me, that's probably more valuable to me than 1 extra level of Bard was going to be. I could have just taken 1 level of Sorcerer, and had a subclass, So, I'm probably not going to bother with any of the 1st level spells, or cantrips in the case of Eldritch Blast. Again, there are some spells here that are really strong standout choices. Number 1 is Counterspell. In fact, Counterspell is so strong that even if I wasn't a lore bard, I might consider using one of my 10th level magical secrets on Counterspell if nobody else in the party can cast Counterspell. Even if one other person can, I might consider it, but I probably wouldn't. But, somebody in the party better be able to cast Counterspell. That's all I was saying. You better have Counterspell, okay? So, as long as, if you've got a couple of people, don't worry about it. But if nobody else can cast it, then, kind of nice. Another option, though, is Aura Vitality. This is a great healing spell. The fact that it just persists and round after round, you can just keep throwing out heals. I love the spell a lot. An interesting option is Haste. I think that if you could take this on a Swords Bard, it'd almost be like a no-brainer, or even a Valor Bard, right? But the fact that you have to use a 10th or a 5th level spell for Haste makes it a lot more questionable in my opinion, because I think there's just other things I could be doing with that. And taking it on a lore bard, I mean, I've only got want to attack around. I'm probably not playing a melee character. Now maybe I'm multi-class with, say, like Paladin or something. I got extra attack from there, right? Maybe I just really want to cast haste on somebody else in the party all the time. I think it's fine there. But in general, like I've already got slow on the spell list, I'd probably rather concentrate on that anyways. But it's still a strong spell. And in certain parties, if you have like that go-to guy who you just want to haste them and they can just go crazy doing tons of damage, I think that's pretty fine. Another great choice, if nobody else has it, is Revivify. Again, I've mentioned Revivify a lot. This is one of those spells that I kind of hate having to take, but you never want to have a party that doesn't have it, because if somebody dies, you know, it's game over, right? But if Revivify is around, then, you know, you're all good to go still. Thunderstep. Thunderstep is an amazing spell. Very versatile. I love this spell a lot. It can be used to get you into the front lines if you wanted to mix it up. It can be used to get you away from the front lines if you're, you know, soft and squishy and suddenly the front lines are right in your face and you didn't think they would be, you know? It's just a really good spell. Spirit Guardians. This one really shines on parties where, you know, if you wanted to be like kind of in that front line tankier type of role. Again, I think this works really well on like certain multi-class builds, like maybe with Paladin or something like that. I don't know that I'd be taking necessarily on a Lore Bard, but it's not the worst choice in the world either, you know? So, it's at least worth mentioning. There's also some damage spells, like Fireball. Hopefully somebody else has Fireball. Fireball is such a great spell, especially at like third, fourth level spell range, right? Between like 5th and 7th, 8th level. It does start to lose a lot of punch as we get higher level, but you know, it's a complete game changer when you're like level 5 or 6. You know, you're gonna just one-shot the entire encounter for you. Fly. Fly is a very versatile and amazing buff, and it's very handy to have. So many problems can just be overcome by flying. Not too long ago, a bunch of my friends and I, we participated in like a charity D&D event that happened at a local gaming store, and they banned the spell Fly and creatures that have the flying ability for player character races. So, no flying, because it just would have overcome too many of the difficulties they thought they were going to have with the game. And, you know, there's probably a reason for that, because players abuse Fly a lot. Fly is awesome. It is crazy how few monsters have, like, decent ranged options. If everybody in the party can fly and just shoot stuff, you can really trivialize a lot of encounters. It's surprising. Anyways, Hunger of Hadar from the Warlock spell list. It's kind of like Darkness, but does damage. So, again, I don't think it's a top tier choice, but it's not bad. And we've already mentioned that bards tend to be kind of weaker on like a lot of battlefield control type spells. You know, will I take it over things like Fear or Hypnotic Pattern? Maybe not, but it doesn't have a lot of the like immune to fear, immune to charm condition problems that those spells tend to have too, especially as we start getting like, you know, to mid and higher levels, right? Those spells really start to fall off when half the things in the game are immune to charm condition. Whereas, you know, a lot less things have Devil Sight, for example. Anyways, one of the few second level spells I would ever consider taking, Pass Without Trace. This spell is amazing. You know, even if your party is nothing but a bunch of morons running around in full plate armor, clanking it up all through the entire dungeon, Pass Without Trace actually gives you a decent chance of being able to like sneak through an encounter if you need to. It's very rare that somebody has like a passive perception of like 15 or 16 plus. So even if that guy's rolling with disadvantage, with a plus 10, he's guaranteed to have at least an 11, you know. If they have like a passive perception of 13, you're probably going to be able to get by them, unless everybody just rolls 1s and 2s, you know, even with disadvantage. Like I said, there's not a lot of second level choices I'd make, but this is one I would at least consider. However, hopefully your party just has a druid or a ranger or something like that, and then you don't have to worry about it. But, you know, if they don't, it's a decent option. The final one, and this one's really questionable. This is like D tier overall, but in the right party composition, it can be a pretty powerful spell, and that is Crusader's Mantle. But it kind of requires that you have a lot of people that are all going to be in melee range, hitting stuff multiple times per round, and that you're probably going to be in there with them. So, again, if I only have one attack around on a Lore Bard, I'm probably not going to take it. But like I said, in certain party compositions, maybe your party is nothing but fighters and barbarians, and not bow fighters either. We've already mentioned that. We need melee guys all clustered together, smacking guys. In which case, it can be a pretty decent option. However, if I am getting second attack, it probably wasn't going to be. Well, maybe it was from Paladin, but in which case I could have just taken it as a Paladin spell. But then I don't get it till level 9, so, I guess. Either way, I consider Crusader's Mantle to be a very weak choice. But like I said, in a specific composition where your party's kind of built around that type of stuff, it actually becomes a pretty nice, reliable, and pretty good source of damage. So anyways, those are my thoughts on this subject. Like I said, there's so many spells these days. I'm sure I've missed a few. I mean, I've missed some in like almost all my other videos, and those were, way smaller spell lists to go over. Like this one was like literally every spell in the game by the time you're done. Once you're considering like your 9th level magical secrets, then I'm sure I missed something. But anyways, those are my thoughts. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I'd love to hear everybody's feedback, both on my choices of spells, some that I might have missed, some that I think I'm overrating or underrating, and of course on my sweet new chair, of course, that I'm sure everybody's noticed by now. Anyways, that's everything, and I'll see you next time. Bye.